This conference will now be recorded.
Fantastic. And I'm just going to try to do a screen share. No, that's not right. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to kick off. So thank you ever so much, everybody, for joining. Barry Clarke is going to take us through this wonderful knowledge sharing session. So Barry is from Related Stories, and we're going to be talking all things presentation. So just to say that this is being sponsored. This event's being sponsored by our brilliant partners, eTabs. They bring cutting-edge automated charting to our projects in PowerPoint and Google Slides. So really relevant sponsor for this. So I'll stop sharing that now, and I'm going to hand over presenter rights to Barry. Let's see whether I can do this. I'm going to make you the presenter, and then away we go. All yours.
Okay, let me. Okay, so hopefully you can see that.
Yes, we can.
Magical. Magical. Okay, well, thank you very much, Kath, indeed, for that fulsome introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the distinction of coming from the great city of Glasgow. One of the distinguishing features of the Glaswegian is the ability to talk very quickly indeed. And I'm going to try and use that God-given talent this afternoon as we have a fair bit to get through. Incidentally, the reason that people from Glasgow speak so quickly is because we have so many interesting things to say, and given our dietary habits and lifestyles, we generally only have a short amount of time in which to say it. So let's get started. This is what I am doing. I'm trying to combine the voice of the consumer and documentary photography to create very concise and engaging insight. So in a nutshell, that's what I'm trying to do. But perhaps the more pertinent question is, why am I doing this? What is it that has driven me to this conclusion? And what problem is it that I am trying to solve? Well, in a nutshell, it is this. So the long overdue demand for engaging outputs to research projects. So a few years ago, I was in a different job, still very much in the insight world, and I noticed an ever-increasing number of RFPs that contained this phrase when it came to describing the outputs from the project. There are variations on it, but it's all around the same central theme, which is people are looking for some sort of engaging, very visual output to the project. And as I say, I think this is somewhat overdue, as I think Insight's always been very good at methodology, good at field work, good at thoroughness, but hasn't always been brilliant at creatively expressing those outputs. And I think that has had consequences for Insight people, Insight departments in bigger organizations. So when I started seeing this sort of thing appearing in RFPs, my reaction was both instinctive and natural. We were a PowerPoint-driven organization a few years ago. This is my previous employer, I should say. And there was genuinely no interesting way of doing this. There was no readily available means of creating engaging, stimulating outputs. And this was a problem because I became aware it made our proposals less convincing than those of other organizations. And I began casting about, thinking about how I could come to some sort of more creative expression of the research projects that we were conducting. I did this as necessity is the mother of invention, and indeed the sister-in-law of panic. So I began thinking about how we could approach this problem differently. And I started considering the role of photography in this. And some of you will know this picture. It's a very, very famous picture, one of the most famous documentary photographs of the 20th century, Dorothea Lange's Migrant Mother, which was taken in the United States in 1936. And while the photograph itself is very well known, what's less well known about it is who commissioned it and why it was commissioned. In fact, it was a project that was started by and managed by the United States government's Farm Security Administration. It was a piece of social research which continued for many years, well into World War II, in fact. Initially, the project was around recording what happened when cash loans were given to farmers, but over time, the project morphed and it became about other things, a kind of larger subject matter. It wanted to look at the lives of sharecroppers in the south and migratory agricultural workers in Midwestern and Western states. And this picture is one of the outputs from that project. What strikes me about this picture, most of all, is that it still provides insight 90 years after it was photographed. The woman's face, the children, the torn and bashed up clothes all kind of convey quite a powerful impression of a hardscrabble life that was there at the time. And having had the idea about this, we then had RFP that came across my desk. It was for Jaguar Land Rover. The piece of work was about Jaguar Land Rover's concern, their tangible concern, that consumers were going to suddenly turn away from SUVs for environmental sustainability reasons. Jaguar had good cause to be worried about this because just a year or two earlier, the market for diesel cars had collapsed following some tax changes. It really doesn't make much sense to have a petrol-powered Land Rover, so this had hurt them, and they're now fearful that this could happen again. So the company I was then working for put in a proposal. We got invited to pitch for the work, and it was a proposal that screamed for qualitative research, but nonetheless, my employer at the time decided that we would give them quant instead. So in short, the pitch was a disaster. But the fortunate thing is we do tend to learn more from things that go wrong than things that go right. And one of the things we did have the opportunity to do during the pitch was to trail the idea for what is now related stories. The response from the client was good. I think it was the only thing they liked about our proposal. And that gave me a nudge of encouragement and made me decide to kind of push on with it and to develop the idea a bit further, to take it out of my head and put it into reality. To do that, I needed to create a case study so I could share with people what this idea looked like. So I decided that as I still had it, I should use the JLR RFP as a means of creating the first related story and using it as an example. And we have that here. So one thing I will say about this video is that Lena, who's a terrific individual, the person we interviewed for this project, is quite loud. So you may need to adjust the volume of your laptop. Will we have a go?
Let's have a go. Let's do it.
Okay.
So when I first got the Qashqai, we were excited. It was a brand new car. I love new cars. As soon as I drove it, I realised it was not the car for me, but it was too late. Every time I got into it, I felt like it was draining the life out of me. It was not enjoyable. It was heavy on the road. I suddenly felt like I'd become mumsy, and that's not what I wanted. I wanted to be me, and the car made me feel like somebody else. And so I really did not enjoy that car. Whereas the Evoque makes me feel like me again, but it fulfills the mumsy title as well. If we're deciding about what type of car, I'd have much more of an influence over it. He'll tell me what he likes, and then I'll say, I don't get that. Let's get this one instead. But it's just because I prefer driving more than he does. This is going to sound shallow, but when I'm driving around, I look at cars and I like the look of some cars. So it's predominantly the look of them. It will be also if I've heard and if they've got a strong reputation, but predominantly it is about the way they look. I don't know anything about under an engine. I love driving. I've driven since I was 17. I don't know anything about an under an engine, so that doesn't influence my decision. I think I'm more about the way the car looks than it is about the brand of the car. There is a lot of people driving Evoques now on the street, so I've seen a lot of them, and every time I drive past one, I'm like, wow, I really like that car. I was just confident that that car was what I wanted, and that's why I didn't need to test drive it. What do I like about it? I just like the way that I feel like I'm in control on the road. Like, all cars on the road are getting bigger. If I was in a smaller car, I'd feel like I'm a little person on this road. In my big car, I feel like I've got status. Yeah, I just feel like I've got some sort of power. I love these type of cars. I really do, but they're convenient for me while I've got two small kids, so I can fit a lot of things in there. Ultimately, I want to go back to having an Audi TT. But that's only got 2 seats. So I think, in terms of like for a driving experience for me, I'll do this for now because it suits my family requirements. When they're old enough, I am going back to a smaller car. We know that ultimately we've got to go to a electric car. We had to change this car over now because our 3-year lease is ending, and it was like, do we make the decision now to do an electric car, or do we wait until Boris has said it's got to be 2030. Boris said it's got to be 2030, so we could go another 3 years in a petrol car and then think about moving to electric. So selfishly, we haven't gone with the environment. It is my car, yeah. It's our car, but I drive it.
Okay, so the Lena story was very helpful to me in developing the methodology for it, and I'll share with you some of the things that I try and do when I put these things together now. So the first one is on recruitment. So there's an example later on of the subset, and what I've done in the past is to use a subset of people who've already been through a qualitative stage of research. So someone is identified from a focus group or from a depth interview typically. These might be people who are particularly articulate, or they have a particularly interesting point of view, or they perhaps illustrate a point which is particularly insightful. And it's going back to those people from the initial qualitative wave is the subset route, and the one that I'm particularly kind of keen to use. Doesn't have to be this way. I did a story with a Welsh farmer who was recruited. The first time I met him was the day I turned up to do it. But ideally, on a bigger project, it would be great to work with a subset of the main qualitative recruits. Second thing is, I do make contact with people before I go to see them, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is I'm keen to stress to them that what I'm doing is not video. We've had an example in the past where the recruiter told a respondent that it was video, and they just refused it as a concept. They're very uncomfortable with the thought of video. They thought they would have to stare into the camera for a long time, and just completely didn't want anything to do with it. However, once we went back and explained that it was photographs and there was no need to look into the camera, then they felt very differently about it and were willing to do it. So from my point of view, it's critical to say that it's a photography-based approach, not a video-based approach. The other thing I want to do in the initial contact is to talk about the day. What I'm keen to do, where possible, is to follow someone on a journey during the day, because the journey shows a number of things. It shows where they live. It shows maybe the shop they go to, the pub they go to, coffee shop they go to, and it just gives you a better feeling for where that person lives. It provides a context of brands that they can use. It does all of these things. It puts some energy into the story as well, and it gives you a sense of moving from one place to another. The other thing I always do is show examples of stories that have been made before, so they have quite a good sense of what it will look like when I get there. The third thing is I always do the depth interview first and then take pictures later. There's a couple of really practical reasons for that. So one of them is that I want to build trust with people, and hopefully that happens during the questioning stage, the interview stage. But also during that interview, I'm looking to identify things that can be photographed later on. Maybe somebody mentions something that's important to them, or is local, or is significant for them. Then I want to make sure that I've got a photograph of that thing that they are talking about. And that's generally how all the stories have worked up till now. I conduct the interview and I write the discussion guide for both. So, in terms of me being managed by another agency, I'm quite easy and able to kind of look after myself on these projects. The next thing is I never ever ask people to pose for me, and in fact, I don't like it when people look at the camera. If someone does look at the camera during the photography stage, I just don't use that picture. There's never a picture of someone looking directly at the camera. I don't want to take portraits of people. I want to take pictures of people doing what they do every day. That's what I want to get to. And also, it tends to put people at ease when they know that they're not going to be required to stiffen up, pose, and look artificial. And of course, for the purposes of research, the last thing you want is people doing something which is unnatural or unusual. You want to record the day-to-day reality of what their lives look like. The next one, I'm grateful to a colleague for this phrase, the irreducible truth. The video you saw of Lena there is 3 minutes, and that's the ideal length that I want to make these things. I want to absolutely distill it down as much as I can, because what I'm thinking about is the use case for related stories could be around making pitches, could be around research debriefs. They are always, as you know, better than me probably, always time-pressured occasions. So there's just simply not time to share a great deal of video or photographic content. But if you can get it down to 3 minutes, even in a time-pressured hour-long debrief, there's time to show at least a couple of these and to kind of put some energy into a presentation. It's called Related Stories for a reason, and the reason is the rise of storytelling and its importance for corporations. The corporate interest in storytelling is a marked feature of recent years. So where possible, as well as just the things that you would normally have in the research questionnaire, in the discussion guide, what I'm looking to add in is elements about people's kind of broader life or their story. It provides some context. It provides a sense of where whatever it is that's being researched fits into their life and what's important to them. So if we can get an element of story in it, then that's important. And that's also the reason that I like to follow people on a journey, because that's essentially a kind of small story in itself. Seventh thing I'm looking to do is to introduce an element of emotion into it quite deliberately. It sometimes strikes me that quite a lot of research avoids emotion, or it tends to dwell on the rational aspects of consumer behavior rather than the irrational aspects, which I think are sometimes more interesting. And trying to get to the emotion makes the story itself more engaging. When it's shown, tends to pull people into watching it because there is an emotional element to it. The next thing is, and I'm very grateful to a fellow ICG member, Nick Bonney at Deep Blue Thinking, for making me think about this. But his point is I'm very aware that many people have used user-generated videos from respondents, usually done on their phone, as a means of adding to the research process. And what Nick had said to me was he had tried this himself for a project he was working on. The videos that came back were, the quality of them was a bit patchy. Nick's point was, it's just not of the quality that I can share with the chief marketing officer, let alone the chief executive officer. I can't put something like that in front of the C-suite. And we are born of the Netflix generation. We're used to high production values now. We're used to things that are, good quality sound, good quality picture. And that's kind of the base level of acceptability. And so in making these stories, I'm thinking of giving people something that they would confidently share with the senior leadership of the company, because the quality of it is sufficiently good. And the C-suite was very much in my mind after a very enjoyable lunch. You'll probably get a sense of that. A very enjoyable lunch with this man here, who broached the subject of unknowable customers. Insight really should have a much higher status within organizations than it does. Chief executive officer should be in an insight department every day, because they're the only people who have the strong sense of what consumers are thinking, doing, how they're changing, and what they want. It seems remarkable to me that insight doesn't have higher status within organizations. And I think some of that may be due to the quality of outputs that the insight function presents onwards within the organization. This gentleman, by the way, is Peter Simpson. He was one of the 3 people who founded First Direct Bank. Peter is a curious fellow and quite a genius, really. And you might think that's rather strong, but it takes a genius to create a bank that people like. That's an exceptional achievement, and Peter was able to do that in the creation of First Direct Bank. It still has a net promoter score, which is miles ahead of any other bank. But when we were having that lunch, Peter made this point here about the senior leadership of companies, of anyone in a company, just do not understand or empathize with their own customers. They're just not capable of it because they're such different people. So again, in my thinking is around trying to reach that audience by doing something that is in a format that they'll accept, which is decent quality and very concise. So that was a big kind of driving motivation. That lunch with Peter Simpson was quite influential. So just to kind of show you an example of all those like bits of methodology that I've talked about there and how they can come together, just want to have a look now at Related Stories. It's rather longer, this one. It's 5 minutes. It was done as part of a project for Fair for All Finance. Fair for All are a company who are interested in helping consumers with the least means find better financial solutions, certainly in trying to divert people from informal sources of credit and lending. So what they did was they created a segmentation which was quantitatively based. We interviewed a number of people last summer. Segment 6 was the one about retired people. And so last summer I met Norman Fannin in Durham. This is an example of the subset. I'd met him, remembered him, with his permission, kept his details, and then approached him again in February of this year for a follow-up piece. What Fair for All wanted to do was understand how the credit crisis had changed the lives of consumers over the winter period. So I'll show you this to you now.
No car, no drink, no smoking, no nights out, no fancy lunches. I mean, I'm not sad. I've been to all the best restaurants, I've been to all the best hotels, I've been all over the world, so therefore I can't go now because I'm not fit enough to go, so therefore you just adjust to it. It's a way of life, yes. Alan Sugar and Richard Branson won't be living my lifestyle. Probably I'm happier than them. I'm certainly happy enough. I've got no complaints. So when I saw the consultant, she says, well, how do you think we're going to go? How are we moving forward? It's actually what you said. I said, it's quite simple. No cigarettes, no alcohol, no girlfriend, no stress. Secret of life. My routine is exactly the same. Out at 8:15, 8:30 this morning with the dog. Weatherspoon's back. She's been on the nature reserve. That one up there this afternoon till about 3 o'clock. Then normally I'll watch something, pick a programme out to watch, or a series or a box set. Then I would take her out again about 5, have tea, and then we'll settle down and do a couple of episodes of something else. Carefully monitor my outcome and my lifestyle. Absolutely no problems. It's exactly the same as it was 12 months ago. It just proved that. Bank balance the same. Freezer's full. If I was buying food, I'd probably spend 40 quid a week on food out of my 180. But by careful shopping and what have you, I can probably get that down to 25 or 30. So it gives me another 1,000 quid a year. So that's 16.7. Somebody's waving the mail a bit. Look how much stuff's gone up. So I don't care if it's gone up 10%, and I'm only spending roughly the 40 quid would be if I had to buy it outright. So I'm roughly spending about 25, 30 quid. So it's gone up 3 quid. What's the point? What's that? Just knock a pint off if you go out and just have a pint less. First reduction is 2 o'clock. 1 sticker, 1/3 off. Second reduction is 4:45 till 5 o'clock. Right. Now, you don't need to like rush around. Just catch the kid with the trolley with the stickers. That's putting the stickers on. Go around and find out what you want. Then stalk them and grab them as they're going on the shelves. I mean, nobody gets hurt, but it's stealth. And then when you get to the till and you get another 20 quid's worth for 7 quid, and you think, yeah, that's it. The energy is a shambles. I couldn't possibly comment on my energy bills because the last one I saw in probably September, I was nearly £300 in credit. Now the government's put 400 in, And then they doubled my monthly account from 50. I only pay £50 gas and electric because I'm away 2 months of the year, the worst 2 months of the year. So they doubled it from 50 to 100. Then the government chipped another 400 in. Then another 150 came through yesterday. So I would roughly, with a guess, I would say by April or my next statement, I should be about 500 quid in credit. Right, so the central heating works like this, right? So that there is one of those heated blankets my daughter got me. You know, you plug them in and they cost 2p an hour. So in between Christmas and New Year, I mean, my heating was never on in November because it was so mild. The heating goes off at 8 o'clock at night. The house is warm and I'm going to bed at 10, half 10, so that's not a problem. So the heating gets reduced to 12 degrees. Up the next morning early, don't touch it. Take the dog straight out. Then 9:30, wait the Weatherspoons, use their central heating till 12:30. The sun goes down about 3:30, 4 o'clock. Knock the heating up to 17.5 degrees for 4 hours. No, yesterday apparently prices have gone up 16%. For some foodstuffs, fresh veg I think was one of them. There's a lot of scaremongering and everything in my case evolves around the budget. If that bank balance, which I showed you there, which is exactly the same last May as it is today, was any different, I would be worried and start looking at why. I would find the reasons why and correct it. So the balance is hovering about the 5.5, up and down. And I never let it drop below 5, because that way I get free, I don't get bank charges. If it gets dangerously low, then just avoid spending for a month and let it until it builds up again. And then absolutely no debts. Why would I? There's nothing I need. By maintaining, having a grip on my finances, which vis-a-vis same balance from May till January, means I'm not doing nothing wrong. So therefore, I'll carry on. Look, at my age, I've been doing my finances for 60 years. So if I was going to make a mistake or drop a clanger, I think I might have done it before now. Don't you think? As I'm starting to fall apart at the seams at 76, stiff and doddery, maintaining my health, that's my biggest problem. But no, at my age, nothing more to see, nothing more to do, and quite happy with my lot.
If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
If people want to just use reactions for questions, then I can just see whether I can see everybody. Let's just see gallery. Has anyone? Because I've got questions. Can I go? Is that all right?
Of course you can.
Is it always black and white, Barry? Because I think I had a feeling that was quite poignant, and I wondered whether the black and white was slightly driving that feeling. So do you? And I wondered about with the stickers, whether seeing that in colour. So that was one question, and just the quality of the photography is amazing. Could you talk to us about the photographic side of things?
Yes. So it doesn't always have to be black and white, Kath. I have a particular preference for it. I think it works better. I think black and white's more generous to people than colour for an odd reason that I can't quite articulate. I think that the other thing is black and white has a distinctiveness about it. So again, when you make these stories, you want it to look different to something that people have seen before. So it's a bit more engaging. So that's the reason. If somebody was wanting me to do it in colour, then I would be very happy to do it in colour. It's just that my personal preference is black and white. The photography itself, so that is generally the way that works is the more pictures you take, the higher your hit rate is. So you need to spend a bit of time with people and you need to take a lot of pictures. But actually taking a lot of pictures is quite helpful because then eventually people get used to the idea that you're going to rattle off a lot. And then because they know that's happening, then they don't kind of maybe tense up or prepare themselves for a picture. They just let the thing go. Norman was absolutely outstanding he's a model of Kate Moss dimensions in that he just, doesn't change his behavior in any way whatsoever. He just does what he does. So he was the easiest man to photograph. And then the journey thing I was talking about, because there were a couple of journeys in that one, it was quite easy to do that. He's busy with the dog, so he's not really paying attention to me. He's busy doing the quick crossword in the Daily Mail. So from that point of view, I think it's relatively straight. It's a question of time and a question of how many pictures you take. Carol, no is the answer to that question, which always surprises me.
So let me just ask the question. Do the participants often ask to see the final story? Is a question from Carol.
No. And I'm surprised by that, Carol. I do say to everyone, because the first couple of stories I did were people I knew, just to help me out to kind of create some examples that I could show people. There were people I knew, and I did say to them, really happy to share this with you. I'm happy to share the pictures themselves with you. But nobody's ever said yes. Norman was a good example. I said, I'm willing to give you any of the pictures from this session. And I said, maybe if you don't want them, maybe your daughters would.
Yeah.
But he said no. So there we are. It surprises me.
So Claire asked about permissions, and that's interesting because there were a few other people in some of the shots as well. Sometimes they were blurred out, sometimes not. But what permissions do you need, Barry?
So I generally do a bespoke one for each person, depending on what it is. So with Norman, I kind of wanted to use that video for promotional purposes, so I wrote that into it. If there will be family members present, would obviously ask for their permission to be involved. Other people were kind of passing or in the background, so there weren't specific permission for just people who were in the shop or on the streets or whatever. But yeah, so the permissions are done bespoke pretty much for each story, and I usually have an idea of who's going to be there, and therefore I can write them in.
Perfect. And do you have a super duper camera? Kirsty asks.
I have a good one, but you don't always need a great camera to take great pictures, and it is a good one and it suits me. So yeah, I'm very happy with the camera I have.
Thank you. And Jonathan wants to know how long it takes to produce.
Yes, good question from Jonathan. Good question. But the Norman one was unusual because it took longer than most. It took 6 hours across 2 days. And it took that length of time just due to logistics. I knew from interviewing him in the summer what his routine was, and I checked with him before I went up, and his routine was just the same as it was in the summer. So I knew that I couldn't get there for him taking the dog out for a walk in the morning, and so the thing was split over 2 days. That's unusual. The Land Rover story was, I think, 3 or 4 hours.
And I assumed that Jonathan's question was more about actually kind of the back end of producing.
Oh, the back end. It probably takes about half a day to edit it all together. Yeah, it probably takes about half a day.
And Carol wants to know how much do you pay, but I'm imagining that it varies might be the answer to that. But yeah.
It did a bit, yeah. So for Norman, I think because it was kind of split across two things. I was doing a bit of research, and my the company I worked for in the early part of the week was also paying for some of it. They just wanted the depth interview, so I think they paid 100, and I paid Norman 80 for it. So he got 180 for that one.
Great. And do you always know what the output is going to be before you've produced it? Is that part of the cherry picking process that you've got some sense, or is it sometimes a bit blind when you're going into it?
Yes, it is a bit blind. So we went out, like in that last story, we went up to the cathedral, and I was a bit nervous about that because I thought he was doing something for my benefit, which was therefore not typical of his day. And I was very nervous about that because the whole point of it is to capture the day-to-day reality rather than doing something exceptional. But I did check with him, and he did tell me that quite often he walked through the cathedral. So I thought, well, that's fine then. That's fine. So the point about phoning people before we do the stories to try and establish a rough idea of what people will be doing.
Right.
And then on the day, you kind of have to accept that you're going to have to work with what you're given. When I
Reality.
when I did the story with the Welsh farmer, for example, that was on a particularly bleak day. It rained from start to finish, and the farmer had said to me he would take me up to the top of the hill, which would have afforded us some glorious views of Snowdonia. Didn't happen because the weather was too poor. And but you just have to adapt to what's there.
Yeah, brilliant. So Rebecca says a really interesting approach, which I have to agree with. Have you done international projects in this way? And if so, how has that gone? Like, have you collaborated with local moderators or anything like that?
No, I haven't done any international stories, and no, I haven't collaborated with local moderators. I have had discussion with someone, another ICG member, in fact, about this, and I think the gist of that conversation was that this person was a qual researcher anyway, and I would entirely understand if she wanted to do the interview herself, which would be fine, I think. And then I could perhaps edit it, and
Right.
I could do the pictures. So I'm open to that kind of more collaborative approach to the thing. I don't have to write the discussion guide. I don't have to do the interviewing. If other people want to do that, then, fine. And we'll come to a way of working around that. I want to be reasonably flexible on that.
That's really interesting. So are you kind of open to working with people where they do the interview, you do the photography, all of that kind of like a co-production kind of
Yeah, because if I was well, as you are, Kath, a very experienced a qual researcher, I would understand why you would prefer to do that yourself. I would entirely understand that. So I think what we would do is speak about the kind of logistics of making the recording, and then work it out from there. But yes, open to different approaches.
Yeah, and I hope you can see that just some of this is people sending you out the love. What a wonderful methodology it is. It feels to me like it's art and research together. Do you get that reaction from people that they feel like they're having quite a creative, artistic experience as well as getting insight?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah, because it's just different to what people have seen before. And I think there's something about looking at still pictures that's different to video.
Yeah.
I think I don't want to get all pretentious on you now, but I think there's maybe something around having the time to think when you look at the pictures, whereas with video, it's just a bit different.
Yeah, I think that feels right to me. It just feels more emotional and more connecting, and like you're more involved as the viewer. It pulls you in somehow. You feel more.
I think you do, and I'm glad you've said that, Kath, because if I did, it would probably sound as if I was a bit, as if I was pushing it a bit. But yes, I think it maybe does do that.
Okay, so Ewan's got a question. Do you ever use multiple individual stories who have contrasting viewpoints? Oh, that's interesting. Or do you just select one individual to work with?
Up till now, it's been one individual, but I did do something for some people I work with, and the way they wanted to do it was a bit of a corporate comms thing for them, and the idea was just to record them having a conversation about a topic that was of interest. And then, I just let the conversation run and then cut the most interesting bits out and photographed the pair of them having a cup of coffee at a cafe in London and then put that together. It was only about a minute long, but it was a different way for that company to kind of express its thinking and to present themselves, as kind of more informally. And I thought that worked quite well. We got a good response on LinkedIn to doing that kind of approach.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we've kind of overrun because we lost a bit of time at the beginning. And I'm seeing that people are having to go, and I need to go and do a bit of field work now as well. So, but Barry, I feel really inspired by that. And I think we've all been incredibly lucky to see your work. So
thank you.
Thank you for that. And obviously we will try and publicize this so that people can also come and watch through LinkedIn, and it'll be up on the website. Let me just double check that. Yeah, see, people are just sending you the love. So yeah, I think I think that's it. So brilliant. I'm definitely going to share this with a colleague of mine who's a really good photographer. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Barry. And apologies for the shaky start. I think you were with the biggest audience of people that have had that horrid experience as well. So you got a sympathetic audience from that point of view, but you kept your cool. Amazing. So,
well, it's nothing without a bit of modest adversity, is it?
correct. Absolutely. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you
Okay.
everybody for coming, and thank you so much, Barry. And thank you also to our sponsors.
And thank you, Kath, for doing it. And Barry, thank you so much. And I'm sorry we have this problem.
Okay,
we need
no
a
problem.
meeting about it now.
All right. Thanks everybody.
everyone.
Take care. See you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.